Michelle for that introduction. And I'm here today to share the wrap up of an ecological drought workshop that was co-hosted by the Southeast CASC and NOAA NIDIS at the beginning of this year. Let's go here. And to start off with, Elliot's going to share a little bit about NIDIS itself.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Elliot Wickham, and I am the new Southeast Regional Drought Coordinator for the National Integrated Drought Information System, known as NIDIS. I know there was a lot of job descriptions given before. I'm going to be speaking specifically in my NIDIS capacity here. So NIDIS sits within NOAA and is a multi-agency partnership that coordinates drought monitoring, forecasting, planning, and information at federal, tribal, state, and local levels across the country. NIDIS's work to help works to help the country proactively prepare for and manage drought risks. However, drought risks, impacts, and response are not uniform across the country. And therefore, NIDIS has created regional drought early warning systems, or DEWs, to help build capacity and manage droughts to address regional needs. We achieve this by supporting improvements in drought prediction and forecasting, effective drought planning and preparedness, and assessing impacts of drought, just to name a few. All of our work at NIDIS is done in collaboration with a wide range of partners at all levels. And in addition, NIDIS hosts the US Drought portal at drought.gov, which contains a wealth of information on drought research and conditions. Next slide. All right, so as I mentioned before, NIDIS's work with partners is key for our success in helping the country prepare and respond to drought. We do this through three major ways in coordinating with partners. One is provide timely, locally relevant early warning information through webinars and newsletters. We build sector and regional specific decision support tools. And we leverage existing partnerships to enhance resources and capabilities among agencies and stakeholders to better prepare and respond to drought. In the Southeast region, we hold a monthly webinar on the fourth Tuesday of every month where we cover climate, water resources, and agricultural conditions over the past 30 days. We also have a special topics presentation each month, which typically covers sectoral perspectives, new tools or research, or other information that is relevant to the Southeast. This special topics for the August webinar focused on the value of drought impact reporting and the role it played in the 2023 Southeast flash drought. In September, that webinar, the special topics presentation will cover Hurricane Helene, specifically the storm setup, the impacts, and recovery in Tennessee. That will be given by the state climatologist for the Tennessee Climate Office. You can sign up for these webinars by scanning the QR code on the bottom left. And we also provide decision support tools for our partners in the region. We created a drought and water dashboard for the ACF Basin to help stakeholders and decision makers in the basin review the conditions across the basin to help contextualize the complexity of water resources and management in the area. This dashboard is available on drought.gov. If you want to sign up for specific drought alerts, NIDIS newsletters, or regional mailing lists, scan the QR code in the bottom center of the slide. You can sign up for as much or as little information as you want. And if you need any help with this or have any questions related to this information, you can always reach out to me at elliot.wickham@noaa.gov. Next slide. All right, so getting into this. Because we work so closely with our partners, we work to tackle the complexities of drought research through the perspective of multiple sectors. The 10 listed here are some of the most common sectors we work with. As you can see, ecosystems is one of those sectors. However, a key piece of information missing for drought in ecosystems was the understanding of the relationship between hydrologic drought, or low flows, and the impacts on aquatic ecosystems. Specifically, how do we monitor, respond, and plan for these events? This co-sponsored workshop between NIDIS and the Southeast CASC in January 2025 was specifically designed to dive into this topic and work to understand the problems and needs for all those involved in the relationship between hydrologic drought and aquatic ecosystems. So Kasia will be going through the background of this, the workshop itself, and the findings in the presentation. And I'll turn it over to you.
Hey, thanks, Elliot. Yeah, so first I wanted to just start by broadly contextualizing this workshop within what the CASCs have done in the past and work in the broader region. So thanks to Elliot for setting up how this kind of fits into NIDIS's sort of traditional role and some of the gaps that they're trying to address. So the CASC has been a frequent collaborator on helping to define the ideas around ecological drought science and transformational drought. And that includes several cross-CASC projects and collaborations that I'll show in a second. Starting in 2015, the regional CASCs held a series of workshops about ecological drought in each of the individual CASC regions, as well as some additional separate workshops that were held in Puerto Rico and the US Virgin Islands. And some of the main takeaways from that workshop were an acknowledgement for the Southeast in particular of the unique set of stressors that this region faces, from population growth to extremely rich biodiversity, particularly aquatic biodiversity and freshwater biodiversity. And the participants really highlighted the need in particular to understand the vulnerability and uncertainty within those systems and to work directly with managers to minimize impacts, which is definitely something that the CASC prioritizes, right? We are here to help fish, wildlife, water, land, and people adapt to a changing climate. And as part of that, we strive to work directly with managers and produce science that directly informs management decisions. So like I mentioned, there have been many projects in the past couple of years that the CASC and CASC scientists have collaborated on, helping to build the idea of what is ecological drought, what is transformational drought across the country. But even outside of the CASCs, this idea of needing to focus more on ecological drought and drought events that are particularly unique and or characteristic of the Southeast has been growing. So NIDIS actually in 2023 held the second workshop for flash drought, which is a key drought event that tends to occur in the Southeast. And this is just one of many regional and national assessments that are relevant to the Southeast that NIDIS has produced in recent years. So key needs from this assessment highlighted a focus on understanding what the actual on-the-ground impacts of drought are, and the importance, again, of strengthening cross-sector collaboration and knowledge sharing. Another recent development was actually a collaboration, again, between NOAA NIDIS and the USGS to hold a set of listening sessions that asked scientists and practitioners where the gaps and opportunities were in different elements related to drought. So these two organizations co-hosted a set of webinars to hear about gaps and needs. And again, here, the participants particularly highlighted the need for data innovation and improvements, shared learning, and again, cross-sector communication and collaboration. So this is a theme that we continue to hear. And so coming out of these existing projects and these listening sessions and these assessments, there really started to be the discussion of how do we follow on from, for example, the 2016 Ecological Drought Workshop and start to address some of these gaps and opportunities that are coming up in these assessments. So in, I would say, early 2023, probably, the discussion started between NIDIS and the Southeast CASC on what we could do regionally in order to further this discussion and this research. And that culminated in deciding to host this workshop. So we began planning in late 2023. And essentially the first step was, of course, to define the scope. So ecological drought is a massive topic that can cover a wide range of issues and obviously a wide range of ecosystems. And so we needed to determine sort of how to narrow that in order to make the balance between bringing in a wide community of managers and scientists while not diluting the actual content and the depth of discussion. So we ultimately decided to focus on aquatic ecosystems for this initial workshop, and that's for several reasons. So first, that was a topic which we felt had reasonably well-defined boundaries, but still contained a range of diverse habitats, including riverine systems, coastal systems, and wetlands. And in particular, the Southeast is a critical hotspot for aquatic biodiversity, and it's a major focus of work for the US Fish and Wildlife Service and other agencies. So in the top left here, you can see a map sort of demonstrating the threatened and endangered aquatic species that are located in the basins of the United States, and that the Southeast really shows up as a particular hotspot for that metric. Also, we thought that this was particularly timely, given that there were several recent extreme examples of the interaction between drought and aquatic ecosystems in the Southeast in recent years. Here I have a picture depicting the Tennessee rescue of the endangered laurel dace species during the summer of 2024. So this is a particularly timely topic and one that it really highlights the unique nature of the Southeast. So building off of recent work and with our defined scope, we then began to plan a regionally focused workshop centered around 6 key objectives that we would use to plan sessions, invite speakers, and design breakouts. The first of those was to increase understanding of drought and hydrology in the Southeast. So set a sort of baseline understanding, because we knew we would have a community of people coming from a lot of different backgrounds. And in particular, we wanted to involve discussions of how regional water demand and climate change was changing those systems, both in managed and unmanaged areas. Second, we wanted to identify management information needs related to all different kinds of drought. Another interesting aspect of hosting this workshop collaboratively between NIDIS and the Southeast CASC is that we tend to have different timescales that we focus on. So NIDIS is very much in the space of early warning, monitoring, and sort of short-term events, whereas the CASC, our niche, tends to lie in longer-term understanding and management of drought and associated changes. The third objective was to highlight recent advancements in hydroclimate research and tools. In particular, we have a lot of great universities and government agencies and NGOs and others working to develop tools that are useful to managers, and we wanted to provide a forum for those to be shared and discovered. Fourth was to identify particular case studies that are actually effectively incorporating low flow conditions into response and planning. Again, being cognizant of the fact that a lot of work is being done in this region on this topic, and wanting to share sort of what might be relevant in one state with managers and attendees from another state that can be translated. The fifth was to assess vulnerability and impacts of drought on aquatic ecosystems. Again, this is an area that is still very much under consideration of understanding exactly how drought is and will impact these ecosystems in the future. And finally, we wanted to identify barriers and opportunities to improve our understanding of and preparedness for drought. And particularly an aspect of that we wanted to discuss was how to improve communication around these issues. So we had these initial objectives, which we then broke into our themes that we used to structure the content of each of the original 3 days that we planned. So first was to, again, set the framework for understanding what drought and low flow looks like in the Southeast in aquatic ecosystems, and understanding what those impacts and vulnerabilities might be. The second was focusing on monitoring and response in the near term, again, more aligned with the traditional niche that NOAA and NIDIS fill in this space. So looking at what indicators are useful for monitoring and understanding that a drought is beginning to happen, how do resource managers respond to that, and what tools and practices exist that can help them respond more adequately. And then finally, we wanted to focus on how we're going to incorporate drought and low flow into long-term resilience and adaptation planning. Again, more the niche, the traditional niche of the CASC network. So we wanted to discuss what does future water in the Southeast look like and what's needed for what we called adaptation toolkits in order to make sure that drought is considered in long-term planning. And so one thing that I mentioned sort of alongside the objectives for session content, we were also extremely mindful of the audience that we wanted to have present at the workshop. So first, given the traditional audience of the CASCs and NIDIS, we knew that there would be a wide spread of groups and organizations that would need to be invited to maintain existing partnerships. But also, as I sort of highlighted in those assessments that had happened, there was a lot of feedback that emphasized the need for more cross-sector discussion, and we really wanted to facilitate a space for that to happen. And it's more and more understood that appropriate management of ecological flows requires a full system approach. That's demonstrated really well in this figure from Drought et al., with a necessary connection between the policy spaces, the water management spaces, and natural resource management. So ultimately, this intent on a cross-sectorial audience was brought into the composition of our steering committee. So we had involvement from multiple federal agencies, state agencies, NGOs, and universities. And we really wanted folks to who approach the issue of drought from different directions with different priorities and who worked with different partners that they could bring into the workshop themselves. So through the steering committee and CASC and NIDIS communications, we also tried to solicit attendance from a similarly broad range of groups for the general audience for the workshop, including local, state, and federal agencies, private industry, academia, tribes, and NGOs. So ultimately, we had over 100 attendees in person and 134 registered virtually, given we had a capacity limit on our venue. So 100 to 110 was all we could unfortunately accommodate in person. And we were really happy to get that full attendance, despite the fact that there was a winter storm when this workshop was occurring. 64% of those respondents from a poll of both in-person and virtual attendees had never previously attended a CASC or a NIDIS event. So that was great. We were broadening that network. And the workshop also served as a learning and engagement opportunity for a group of 6 Global Change Research Fellows, which is the graduate fellow program that the Southeast CASC hosts. And they were able to learn about the topic of ecological drought, help with workshop facilitation, and then worked on summary and analysis of the results, which you'll see in a bit. We also had a significant amount of representation from early career professionals, which was great to see. And yeah, so in the registration for the workshop, we also included several questions to get a sense of, where registrants worked in this space, what they were particularly interested about learning on this topic, and why they were interested in attending. So a word cloud was generated from some of the summarized responses to our question, what do you hope to gain from this workshop? Really showcasing that knowledge sharing, networking, and understanding the needs and opportunities were pretty common theme from most of the attendees. Similarly, a summary of answers to the question, how will you apply outcomes from this workshop, highlighted addressing stakeholder needs and understanding climate change impacts as key goals of attendees. So over the course of 2 days, from January 7th to 9th, we had 11 tables at a tool and resource fair, 2 full breakout sessions with 8 groups, 4 panel sessions with a total of 19 panelists, a poster session with a total of 20 posters, 4 presentations with a total of 11 presenters, and 1 World Cafe session with a total of 7 tables. So in the planning of this, we had actually planned for a 3rd day, but there was some logistical needs that meant that we had to transition into a 2-day workshop. Luckily, we were able to keep most of the workshop content that we had planned, but definitely would have loved to have more buffer time and unstructured sort of networking time for participants. So now moving into some of the takeaways. So we sort of separated these into 2 major buckets, actionable information and knowledge sharing. And everything I'm about to show is discussed in more detail in the workshop summary, which I'll share at the end, as well as a link to where you can find it. So in terms of the outcomes, in terms of actionable information, this is really where our 2 breakout sessions and our World Cafe were critical and addressed our objectives around assessing vulnerability, identifying current and future impacts, identifying management information needs, and identifying barriers and opportunities. So we first asked participants to identify a list of impacts to ecosystems and management actions that they would take in response. Then, based on those, they were asked to come up with a list of needs in these 4 categories. So communication, coordination, and policy, understanding of the biological, ecological, and physical interactions and response in aquatic systems, the future conditions, including near-term forecasting and longer-term projections, and current system conditions, so more focused on monitoring, data collection, and key indicators. And so in these 4 categories, everyone was asked to identify if we had a tool or resource, a plan that addressed these things, we could do this action better, right? So we were always trying to get participants to connect a need to a tangible management outcome. Then each of these 8 breakout groups placed these identified needs in the different categories on an impact effort grid and discussed the placement between them. So obviously, the sort of sense of where a particular action might land on how much effort versus how much impact it will take is going to differ based on the background of the person, how familiar they are with the particular need that they're discussing and what it takes to develop it. But we hope that that intergroup discussion would lead to sort of a consensus decision on where to place it. And in our workshop summary, we summarized the needs that tended to end up in that upper left quadrant of low effort and high impact. Again, obviously understanding that that was a subjective assessment based on the attendees in those groups. And some of the key themes that were identified here included the need for more structured data sharing across sectors, improved access to existing tools, communication between sectors, building public trust, and understanding of how drought develops and resolves, a better understanding of what the impacts of drought on ecosystems even are, expanded monitoring and data collection, particularly in low data areas. So those were identified as groundwater, wetlands, caves, very small streams, and intermittent streams. Our second element that gathered information for needs, this time with more of a focus on long-term planning, was a World Cafe where participants rotated through several topic tables and provided responses to a set of standard questions. Again, we provide all the responses in the workshop summary, but some of the common needs that emerged across all the tables were that state and federal governments do tend to be the primary sources of data, both observations and modeling results. These data are robust, but are often not available for necessarily the locations or the time periods that are needed by managers or at the resolutions needed. For example, monitoring networks tend to be biased towards the lowlands versus mountains and more populated areas. And they also tend to maybe not cover those unique or difficult to access locations, like we mentioned, such as springs, caves, and groundwater systems. Also highlighted was that data, there's a lot of data out there, but it would often be more useful if it was accessible in web-based dashboards rather than data catalogs to allow sort of visualization and comparison of data and just easier access for users of different skill levels, technical skill levels, to access, explore, and apply the data, as well as integrate information from different sources. Users also highlighted that a lot of these tools, it would be great if they had some way to sort of benchmark some of this information based on relevant ecological and management thresholds, and just provide additional context to the data that would help facilitate actual planning and decision-making. Third was that additional research and development are broadly needed to better understand ecological responses to drought across various species and habitats, but it would be particularly useful to have that for umbrella species or indicator species. And finally, there was an expressed need to synthesize existing information on known ecological responses to drought and to systematically compare and understand best practices for applying existing data sets, models, and tools. So the second aspect, like I mentioned, beyond this sort of actionable information was just a general opportunity and environment for knowledge sharing among the attendees. So as we highlighted at the beginning, knowledge sharing and networking was really identified as high priority and was inherent in a lot of the initial workshop objectives, including increasing understanding of drought and hydrology drivers in the Southeast, sharing case studies, and highlighting as many recent advancements and successes in managing and understanding ecological drought. So we started all of our breakout sessions essentially with a framing exercise to ask participants to identify the indicators of drought that were relevant in their systems. So the way that we had separated the breakouts was essentially by habitat type. So we had lowland riverine, mountain riverine, forested riverine systems, coastal wetland systems, coastal estuary systems, inland wetland systems, and then systems that were more closely tied to agricultural development and urban development. So basically this framing exercise was a key way to get, again, everyone on the same page, because most of the groups were sort of a great mix of academics, managers, industry folks, water managers. So they're all applying and addressing water availability in these systems from very different perspectives. And part of the challenge of this workshop was building that common language and understanding sort of how everyone was talking about changes and impacts in a given system based on their background. So unsurprisingly, the indicators that were highlighted most often among the groups as critical to understanding drought occurrence, impacts, and progression ran the spectrum of hydrologic, climatological, ecological, social, and economic topics. So I've just highlighted a few of those here. And again, we have these detailed in more detail in the workshop summary, as well as where they were discussed by each of the individual breakout groups. And then a second focus was to share existing tools, data, and resources. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of great work happening. So part of the goal was to make sure that the work that was being done or was in the progress of being done was being shared across this community. So this was highlighted at the outset as a requested deliverable from our steering committee. And with the help from the Global Change Research Fellows, the workshop summary actually has a compiled list of all the data, tools, and resources that were mentioned and shared at the workshop throughout the presentations, panels, posters, and the tool and resource fair. So you're welcome to go through and look at that as a appendix in the summary. And we also have hopefully a more interactive visualization of that information coming as a companion to the workshop summary. So going through some of the key outcomes and goals for the CASC in particular. So we are interested in understanding more for synthesis and assessment, so supporting science planning needs, and also convening a unique community of cross-sectorial professionals from federal, state, local, tribal, academic, and nonprofit organizations. Partnership building, so strengthening engagement with existing partners, but also expanding connections with potential partners or partners with more peripheral engagement. So Army Corps, we had a great Army Corps engagement, as well as folks from NOAA and the USDA, including the Forest Service. And also a great benefit was to continue strengthening that USGS NIDIS collaboration and the collaboration with the Southeast DEWs in particular. And then finally, hoping to support wider drought initiatives. So building on needs and gaps that were identified in recent syntheses, and assessments, but also supporting USGS drought priorities and cross-mission area initiatives. So ultimately, there were a few broad takeaways from the workshop that came up again and again through sessions and breakouts. So the breakouts highlighted that there are a range of near-term opportunities for collaboration, communication, data, and information efficiency. There's a lot of information already out there, and it is being used by professionals across science, policy, and management, but there's definitely work that can be done on making it more accessible and integrated across sectors. Part of that development includes expanding the coverage and access of data, so making sure it's shared and available where users need it to be. And there's also a lot of opportunities for synthesis of existing information, including understanding use cases, best practices, and the limitations of existing information, and contextualizing it in a way that makes it relevant to understanding and planning for ecosystem impacts. Finally, there's a continued need for this kind of cross-sector communication, collaboration, and trust building. And folks really saw that as a key outcome and opportunity of the gathering. And we got that feedback a lot from participants. So they were coming out of this with new connections and project ideas, and they just really valued the space to have these conversations with professionals that they might not interact with on a day-to-day basis in their day jobs. Elliot, oh, no, sorry. Oh, why? Oh, there we go. Okay. So as far as deliverables go, as I've mentioned several times, there is a workshop summary. So that is out on the CASC website. It's also been publicized through the NOAA NIDIS channels. You can access that post on the CASC website by using this QR code. So that includes breakout session report outs, session summaries, that tool and resource list that I mentioned, and then tool and poster session abstracts. So really everything you could really want to know about how the workshop was structured and what went on. And then as far as next steps go, we are still working with the Global Change Research Fellows to build on some of the takeaways and action items from the workshop. And part of what they have been doing is building out a web dashboard of the tools and resources listed in that workshop summary with some additional contextual information. And they have also been working on putting together a couple of tool highlights, particularly tools that connected to their own research and interests. And this is definitely an area that we think has a lot of potential for future development and could be built out as a good resource for this community of practice. So just wanted to end with a couple of great pictures from the, well, I guess these aren't necessarily specifically from the Yates Mill Aquatic Conservation Center, but that was where we went for our workshop field trip. The Yates Mill Aquatic Conservation Center is a great lab associated with NCSU that is actually propagating several local endangered species of mussel and snail, including the ones pictured here. So if you're interested in those, you should definitely check out their website. And the participants really enjoyed that part if they were able to stick around and attend that. And as well as the workshop summary QR code, if you're interested in some of the other background information, we have a QR code to the workshop website as well. And I think that is all we have to share here. So I might just keep up this QR code if folks want to get a picture of that, but otherwise, I think we do have time for questions.
Kasia, thank you so much. Folks, I also put that link in the chat that you're able to click on, and it'll take you directly to the post that has the report and all the goodies that Kasia was just mentioning. Reminder, the Q&A box is down in the middle of your bar. If you have a question, feel free to throw it in there, and we'll give you a few moments to